is 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast, your weekly space games podcast where I look at space games, but I bring on some esteemed guests to tell me a little bit more about their perspective. So today, brought on a podcast regular, a good friend, a fellow YouTuber, the architect, Morphologis, to talk about Starfield.
Hello.
Oh,
I don't know about esteemed, but I appreciate it. Yeah.
Highly
Starfield
esteemed.
indeed.
I'm always happy to have you on, man. You are one of my inspirations for doing YouTube videos, and I think everybody knows just how precise and beautiful the videos you make around Star Citizen ships are. So I'm excited to see what you do about Starfield, again with a little bit more spread and reach. But first, I kind of want to talk about Star Citizen just a little bit. We have had quite the year so far, with 3.18 coming out, and with a lot of stuff surrounding PES. How are you feeling about the game right now?
Honestly, talked a little bit before the podcast. I'm not feeling great. I think that stability has suffered all year. I've tried to run some community events, but in each case, we had problems with players desyncing, becoming invisible, not being able to connect. It's just been a really, really rough year for being able to play and enjoy the game. I know not everybody has this experience, but I personally have had this consistently enough that it's just kind of forced me to take a step back and play other games because I spend way too much time just trying to get the game to work. Unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, and not only that, the actual gameplay this year has been pretty stagnant. Like, there hasn't been very many new things that they've added. They added salvage, but only in part. It's not the whole thing. And that's it. You know, like, what else? What other big gameplay things have they done this year? It's pretty dead, unfortunately. Or for whatever reason, could be working on Squadron 42, which is what I suspect, or who knows.
Not much of a mining enthusiast.
Not much of a mining enthusiast, but even if I were, I think that the ultimate issue is that so much of the other gameplay loops don't tie in any meaningful way that it just is ultimately a fruitless endeavor, because why spend all that time earning that money, which is ultimately the goal for me if I do mining, when that money isn't really useful for much. Like, there's what do you buy? You know, it's buy more ships that can be lost to the next swipe. All right. Then what? It's like, what do you do? I mean, there's just not much to do right now. So it's, I don't know.
I was very excited to mine stuff and then use the cargo refactor to move that mined stuff back to the other ship, and have it go and sell. I was really bummed out when we found out that even with everything getting physicalized as cargo, you still couldn't take some mining bags and go and just sell off the stuff in it and then take those back to a prospector or a mole. I feel like that the mining improvements have been great, but that would really, really help with what you're saying, just connecting it to something else.
Yeah. I mean, I think that more than that though is crafting and stuff. Like, what do we use that stuff for? We can craft a multi-tool, but just more, and even crafting by itself isn't going to be enough. I mean, we need something to do. We need some goal for everybody to work together towards. And I'm just not feeling it right now. Never mind the fact that I can't get people together.
Yeah, that has been
some
rough.
Obvious stuff. Yeah, there's some obvious stuff with PES that I thought that we would expect to be able to see with the PES release, but we still have yet to see it. Saving log on and log off location, 30K protection, physicalization of components and cargo and all that stuff that they talked about as being enabled by it. We still have not seen the fruits of that labor. It's ultimately it's a tech that's there, but it doesn't really affect the game in a full way.
Right.
Because we can't even get back. There's also no instant saving Like there's no way for us to get back into the same shard, right? So the point, it just feels like we've been treading water for the past 4 years, and it's getting really, really hard. And I'm seeing it in interest in the game on YouTube. I've never seen lower numbers than this. I'm seeing it in frustration in comments. I'm seeing it in other content creators who are turning more and more to drama because there's just nothing to talk about. So yeah, it's because, and now CIG, like we're starting to see them make really questionable decisions for trying to shore up funding, which is clearly going down this year. It's just it's not, CIG, Star Citizen, and the community. Everything's not really in a good place, and I think that a lot of people are going to say I'm being a naysayer, I'm being a doomer or whatever. But I think that they're just trying. They're sticking their heads in the sand, and they're blind to the reality of what's going on right now with Star Citizen, and it'll be unfortunate for them when it finally hits rock bottom and they get that rude awakening. But I'm wide awake, and I'm trying to say something about it because hopefully CIG can, turn the corner and try to salvage some of these mistakes. But I don't know, I don't even know what they're thinking with those career kits. It's just who knows.
I think there is like with all things, there are positives and negatives, and a lot of people who want to be positive are looking at the good times they're having in game, looking at the improvements that they've seen this year. I would say that the gameplay is better than it's ever been in terms of the choices that we have, obviously with salvage coming in, and then there are more missions than there used to be. But stability is worse because of PES stuff. Some of the decisions they're making, like you said, is worse, and definitely the way that they're communicating information is feeling pretty bad. So I would agree that.
But I think better is relative. Like better than last year, sure. But let's like I took there's a flight of stairs in front of me that's 10 stories, and I took one step forward. All right, yeah, it's better than before, but it's one step forward. It's not where we should be, in my opinion. I mean, they've been talking about Pyro since 2018, but the last CitizenCon. That's also the last time we got a Squadron 42 trailer, by the way.
Yep.
It's just they've been really, really slow on tangible progress. And people who say, well, they've made tons of technical progress, it frustrates me to no end, because most casuals from outside the community that I see come in look at it and say, nothing's changed from the last time I played it 2, 3, 4 years ago. And then they just set it back down again and do nothing. And that's the reality of it. It's just, yeah, they've made some small steps forward, but ultimately that tangible progress, there's just not been tangible progress, really, at all.
And I'm not saying that they've made what they should have made by now. I think, though, that what is there is still better than what was before. Bar's low. The fact that changing the way that resources respawns is such a big deal for mining is indicative of how slow the progress has been. But I do think that players who have played for years, have more choices on what they can do now than they did before. And for the people who are trying to be positive and see the I guess more of the fun side than the worrying side of things, that's what they focus on. But I would say that there's also absolutely a difference right now in the way that the game is kind of communicating itself than before. And like you said, we talked about a lot of this before the podcast, but just the lack of sprint reports, the silence on things that were kind of already being said to be this year, like the Road to 4.0 videos stopped. In the letter for the chairman, they said they wanted to harden PES to allow us to pick servers to log into. But since that's not finished, that means they haven't been able to move on to the replication layer. So like there are a lot of things that have not been done that were kind of said were going to be done in the first half of this year, and they haven't said anything about them. And then they're doing things like the sale you talk about. Like I see where you're coming from. for sure. There's
Like if they could communicate why this is happening, that would definitely alleviate some of my personal frustration. It wouldn't turn the interest in Star Citizen around, because people in the wider community won't give a crap. They just want to see progress. I mean, like, there's so many things that it's so easy to forget when we're down in the weeds as a content creator for Star Citizen. And sometimes I wish I would have written down every time they talked about a feature they planned on coming this year, because I keep forgetting about all the things they talked about that they wanted to work on this year. They wanted to do engineering this year. They wanted to do the new star map this year. They wanted to have server meshing tested, bounty hunting done. You know, like they wanted to move forward with PES and get that shard saving done.
AI combat, platforming,
AI combat with the AI
scanning.
on the ground, walking around, FPS scanning. Like
those are all things that were just in the letter from the chairman.
Physicalized cargo. Sorry, persistent habs, persistent hangers. Like, and that stuff has to come according to them, what they said before they did server meshing. So, like, where is even that stuff right now? Like, what's happening with it? We've got no word on it whatsoever. They're just completely dark on it, and we're almost at the end of the year now. I mean, we're closing in on CitizenCon, and traditionally, the CitizenCon patches are pretty light on features because they're all focused on delivering for CitizenCon, and then the patch after that is typically light on features because it's the end of the year and they want to go home for the holidays. So, like, what can we realistically expect at the end of this year? Nothing really. I mean, there's not going to be anything worth writing home about for Star Citizen in 2023. And hate to say it, but
I don't agree with that. I think that there's still some space for some pretty big features. Yeah, you say
that, Tomato, but like, why aren't they talking about it when they know that the numbers are going down? You think they'd want to hype people up about it? It means that they're not confident of getting it done this year. That's why they're not talking about it. That's why they don't talk about things, is when they're not confident they can get them done. And it's because they're not talking about any of this stuff anymore. My feeling is that they're not confident they can get any of it done this year. So
I think that they're definitely unsure of what we'll get in. I think there is a possibility of some of these big features getting in, and I will definitely admit that I feel like it's less likely now, ever since they've started talking about Alpha 3.20 and not talked about any of the stuff that should have pretty obviously been in there. But I do think that there's still
Arena
a space
Commander
there.
updates. That's it. Like, and the Hull C with no gameplay surrounding it. You know why they're selling that is because they need to sell a ship. It's not because, because originally the reason why they didn't release the Hull C for the longest time is because of the tech limitations. It wasn't just because the animations were a problem. It's because they said that it would quote unquote break the economy. And they wanted to save it for like when they had a more fully fledged economy, and when they had the physicalized cargo, and they had the cargo decks. By the way, cargo decks, what the hell happened to that? You know, that's been around for like 2 years now, and they've done nothing with them, nothing at all. It's just really frustrating. They do something and then they forget about it and move on and do something else, and they never talk about it again. I've lost my patience this year, really, and you probably can tell.
I see it.
Yeah,
I see it. What are your feelings about, like, by the end of the year, if it rolls out as you've been saying, if they're not putting out bigger features or some of these more significant things, if they're not releasing news on server meshing by the end of the year, like, what do you think you're going to end up doing?
Well, I do still have some faith that they're going to announce Squadron 42. That they're going to announce a date for it so that they can relaunch the sale page, because they're losing money right now by not having a sale page for it, and they're aware of that. They need more money for development. So they're going to probably relaunch at $70, I would say, along with a new trailer, maybe a couple people from Squadron coming over to do a panel on the second day, which will maybe be focused on Squadron 42. That's what I'm hoping to see. If that doesn't happen, I don't know what they're thinking, because what is there to talk about other than Pyro? They've been talking about Pyro for 4 years. So it's yeah. Anyway, I really honestly hope that's what happens. If that does happen, I think it'll reinvigorate some interest in the game. Not a lot, but some. For me, and I think for the wider community. But in the meantime, I think Starfield is a strong possibility. covering some news and gameplay with that, doing some ship reviews with that, and there's a couple other games that are coming out, like
Well,
the
yeah,
new edition for Cyberpunk. I'm really interested in. I really want to look at that.
you
Um,
actually, like, originally before Star Citizen, you were doing things like Space Engineers and Planet Side.
yeah,
What other kinds of games did you come from? Did you do RPGs before? Have you always been sort of more into like the sim side of games and MMOs?
I've played RPGs before. In fact, I did some videos on Black Desert Online when it came out that did very well. But those require a lot of time and investment to get into to become knowledgeable. So those are harder to become content creators for. So when you see a lot of people cover those games, you see that their channels are pretty small and their viewership is pretty small because it's a difficult genre to cover. With few exception. I mean, Asmongold is like the known exception for covering WoW stuff, but he's more of like a character than anything else. I don't think people watch him necessarily for his gameplay on World of Warcraft. It's more because he's hilarious and
Yeah.
fun to listen to. You know.
So would you say Star Citizen suffers from that same problem?
Yeah. Well, I think Star Citizen, because it has so many different things that you can do that are not prescribed gameplay, where you can kind of do ridiculous things like have tank battles or throw things out the back of moving ships in atmosphere and see what happens, that you can create some pretty fun content with that when the game works. But lately, the reason why it's not been working is because we haven't had very many tangible updates recently. And so it's hard to make content that you've not seen before, which is what drives more interest and growth in the game. You can see it with people like Ali, who just posted a video about how he feels like there's just nothing he can do anymore. There's no new thing to cover. It feels like he's just constantly doing the same thing over and over again. He's not the only one who feels that way. And
Recognizable
that's down
feeling.
to, yeah, CIG just haven't had tangible progress for us to cover. So it's become extremely hard to make fresh and interesting content on the game. So like I said, we're resulting to drama and picking each other apart in the community, like inventing crap to be angry about when it's ultimately meaningless.
People picking each other apart? What's going on?
Yeah, well,
Punches being thrown?
I have noticed through these years of covering Star Citizen that when there's a lull in development, that the community starts to look inward and start drama with each other over things that are somewhat silly.
There's definitely been a lot of, and I don't know if this is because of the introduction of Starfield to a lot of people's realm. A lot of people just found out about Starfield, right? It was announced 3, maybe 4 years ago. It's been public knowledge for probably 7 or 8 years, but a lot of people are just finding out about it and kind of drawing lines between that and Star Citizen. Like, I will probably see comments like that on this podcast, but generally covering Starfield and talking about alternatives has certainly drummed up more kind of, like, I guess, questions of like, are you really into Star Citizen? Are you going to another game, like that kind of stuff? And I feel like that is part of that sort of unnecessary drama of debating between the two games and trying to
I think
create
that
a competition.
the source of the frustration in Starfield is that people, because of what they see at the previews, they're jumping to unrealistic conclusions about what the game's going to have, and assuming that they've just done what Star Citizen's done in a very short period of time, which isn't true. And they're setting themselves up for horrible disappointment when the game comes out. And I've seen that in the comment section. I've seen the backlash when I start talking about when I posted that video that Starfield like a year ago, Starfield is probably not going to have any atmospheric flight. People freaking out. I said, like, how can you say that? Like, how do you know? I was like, I saw the stuff that they showed. They're not showing it,
Yeah.
so it's not going to be a thing. And it was like revealed like a couple weeks later that, yeah, Todd was like, no, it was too troublesome and it doesn't add to gameplay at all for him. I think that's debatable. I think some people enjoy that. I do. I enjoy the atmospheric flight. I think it adds some really fun possibilities that you can only get in Star Citizen.
Well,
But
it has echoes of what David Braben said about ship interiors, right? It's like something that you could definitely do without, but there's plenty of people who are out there looking for that kind of thing.
I think that ship interiors are the next step of standard for for space games, though. I think that was a misstep. Regardless of whether or not they are part of gameplay, I think you can make them part of gameplay. You just need to think about what gameplay mechanics you can involve with the interior of a ship. I mean, you look at a game like Sea of Thieves, and you like that kind of fun maintenance between a group of four. It's really simple, but it's fun. I mean, throw that into a game, and it'll be fun if it's a space game. I think that they're just thinking too narrowly about how a space game can be created to understand that the interiors can have value. But I think the other thing is with that is that people now at today's day and age have a really maybe unrealistic view of technology, thinking that we're really far when we're still not that far. And I kind of expect to have that level of detail. Like, I should be able to go in spaceships now. Like, aren't we far enough to go into spaceships? Like, games look almost lifelike. We should have ship interiors. So you see that a lot now with new games that are in the genre coming out. Like, does it have ship interiors? Does it have atmospheric flight? Are planets fully realized? People are now expecting this, which is kind of crazy because it's a huge undertaking, as Todd alluded to in his interviews about how incredibly expensive and time-consuming development is for something like that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to communicate how difficult that is to somebody who's not in development.
Well, and it also,
but we kind of know, because like we've covered Star Citizen. We've listened to the developers talk about this technology and how time consuming and difficult it is to do. And it has given us, I think, an appreciation for why other games don't do it. And why when people say someone's going to make another Star Citizen, you kind of laugh, because there's no shortcuts. It's just very time consuming and expensive to make a very big detailed space.
And people will generally point at procedural generation and say, well, they can make this very quickly with this new tech, and without realizing that part of the difficulty of making the system was making the stuff that procedurally generated it. Like, we've seen how
how do you make that look realistic? I mean, I think No Man's Sky is a perfect example of how you can't just rely purely on automated generation, because it creates things that look different but are at the same time the same. Like, there's a lot of sameness between the planets, and Hello Games has done a lot to try to alleviate that problem in their updates, but it still has that feeling, and it still has some of that strangeness where you get weird, unrealistic feeling animals and stuff that just because it's procedurally done, it doesn't feel like it has any heart or soul from an artist. And I think that's what people want to see when they're going and visiting planets and finding new aliens and stuff. So the procedural generation is not I think we've gone past the point of well, let me see. How can I compare it? Like, like when synths came out, like, this is before our time, but like if you've heard 80s music, everything has like synths in it, right? Because synths came out at that point and people were like this is the future. But then it became like a fad, and people realized you don't have to do everything with synths. And then it became more of a thing that people use sparingly. And I think that's just kind of how new technology is used. Like, at first people think it's the answer to everything, and then they realize its limitations, and they have to, realize it's not going to solve all the problems. Like, I think we're having that now with AI. People think it's going to take everyone's jobs and solve all of our problems, but it's not doing that. It's very limited. It's actually not the AI we thought it was, I think procedural generation is exactly that. It's like game developers are finding out now that it doesn't solve all your issues. It doesn't make a better game. That you need to have an artist in some way or fashion, and that means that there's no shortcuts. You still need to have somebody crafting part of what you're doing. It's a tool to assist you in making the game faster, but it's not going to make the game for you.
Yeah. So going back to Starfield and what you were saying, expectations have reached a certain level. Excitement has reached a certain level.
I think that the expectations are. I think some people are concerned about the hype, and it's warranted. I think that some people are overhyping it. It depends on who you talk to and what their perception is. Like I said, those people or I've been trying to point out about like there's no shortcuts for making a new Star Citizen. People who don't follow development of Star Citizen and don't understand the difficulty in the development of a game like this are probably looking at Starfield and thinking it's Star Citizen but done, and they're going to be hyped up for nothing and get super disappointed. And in that sense, the hype is it's not good. Like, it's gonna disappoint a lot of people. But for me, I'm hyped for just realistic reasons. Like, I know it's going to be a limited experience. I know that there's no atmospheric flight. I know that the gameplay spaces are probably tiles and not actually fully planets. I know that it's going to be no multiplayer. That it's going to be there's going to be a lot of shortcuts with it, more traditional gameplay. But I'm okay with that because there's so little in the space right now for science fiction, for this type of game, that it's like the only game that I'm looking forward to for like the space sci-fi genre right now. I mean, what else is there?
I think that's what a lot of people miss when it comes to this game. And also with Cyberpunk, I made a video about Cyberpunk before it came out. Something like, why are people so hyped? And there were a couple different reasons in the video, but one of the big ones was that, like, how many AAA Cyberpunk experiences can you have? You can't. It's not. Deus Ex is really the only big Cyberpunk action adventure story based game that you can get into. So when they drop Cyberpunk 2077, of course people are going to be hyped.
There are other indie games that made Cyberpunk games. So like there's one called The Ascent that was pretty good. But these types of games are, because they're in indie games, they have a very niche audience. They're more narrowly focused on a specific type of gameplay that is more affordable for smaller studios to do. Not like a first-person GTA type experience in this science fiction world. So yeah, like for me, I really like Cyberpunk, the aesthetic, the stories, like the darkness of it. That I was so, and I love the game, even with its bugs. To this day, I love the game. I loved it from the beginning. I didn't care so much about the issues with performance because I had at that point already played Star Citizen and I was used to it. I was like, yeah, this is all right. You guys don't know how bad things can get.
They were younglings.
Like Star Citizen has been a kind of like training, like have you ever watched Dragon Ball Z, like in the weights you gotta wear to train? Like it's the weights that we're wearing to train for gaming. You wear these weights, you can do anything.
Yeah, that was that was also, to be honest, Cyberpunk pissed me off as a game, not because of the performance, but because of just how it didn't come in as an RPG. And I know the marketing was a little bit. In that sense,
yeah. I think they had a lot of ideas of what they wanted to do, but the budget didn't match. The budget and time frame didn't match the scope that they wanted to accomplish, and that's their own fault for not realistically setting those expectations. But I think that also comes down to like the people who are higher up, who again have these maybe unrealistic expectations for the technology of today, thinking that all of these new tools are going to make it faster to do these bigger games, when in reality we're not really that far from the past of game development where you had to put a lot of developer hours in. And so they overestimate what they can do in a short amount of time. CIGs is guilty of this. We know this very well. Yeah. But other people are guilty of this too. And I think that CD Projekt Red is unfortunately very guilty of this problem, thinking that they could do more than they actually could. And it's unfortunate because you can see, like if you look closely at the game, all the things that they wanted to do, what they had planned to do, the pieces here and there that they kind of left, like all the physicalized stations that they made. And some of them are in a half complete state where you could see that they had doors and stuff. They wanted you to get onto these trams and travel around in real space instead of like teleporting and stuff. Like they wanted to do a lot of cool stuff, but they just didn't have the time and the resources to do it. Yep.
And Starfield, so we were mentioning that it is a game that represents something a lot of people can't explore right now, like a simple sci-fi RPG. And I think me and you are on the same page.
And I would say, and very importantly, in a style that is realistic, because that is something that we don't often get. I think a lot of big developers even kind of go the safe route of making like a cartoony or like stylized approach to save on development time. It's very rare to see this type of game. And I think that's why it's also compared to Star Citizen so much, because like in terms of fidelity, it looks so similar in some shots to Star Citizen. Like it feels of the same vein. Maybe the styles of some of the ships are different, but you get the feeling, don't you? Like just right away.
And looking at something like Mass Effect, even you get Mass Effect, which is, I think, the best comparison to what Starfield is aiming for.
Probably, yeah. You're probably right. I mean, I think, well, maybe not quite though, because Mass Effect was very narrow and like it was very, very much on rails for like the story. Like there wasn't a lot of open exploration. It was more, you had some areas you could go around and then you had to go to the objective. But I think it looks more like this is going to be closer to Fallout in space, which is what I've been saying. But what else did you? Because I didn't play it so closely, so maybe you see more than I do about. Because I played Andromeda, but it was the most terrible example apparently. So.
Well, they push you in a direction, and I think maybe Mass Effect 2 was the best at this because it was so expansive with the team. They really do try and open up the galaxy and say, there's something that you need to get done, build your team, get the relationships together with them, figure out their own missions, all that stuff, but do it in whatever order you want. So you can meet somebody in the first 20 minutes of the game that another player might not meet until the last couple of hours. And they do this really good job of making it feel like you are running through somebody else's story, which is probably where we kind of diverge when it comes to Starfield. But it also, you see elements of Starfield's story looking a lot like Mass Effect. The idea that you are interacting with some artifact from the past and it's only reacting to you is like textbook Mass Effect. Or the idea that you're going to have these like sort of, well, that's actually the main comparison. I won't draw more, but that's besides the point. My point was that Mass Effect has this very high sci-fi kind of feel to it, a very futuristic sci-fi, whereas, like you said, Starfield feels much more approachable. They call it NASA punk. It's got like this very 80s, 90s, 1980s and 90s sort of influence to the stuff. And that also, I think, helps to build the identity of the game. It helps to get people realizing that this is a long-term thing. They're designing this. There's multiple sequels. Like, it feels much more substantial than something like Outer Worlds, which I think was another good game for sci-fi, and space folks just wasn't everything that I think people are looking for. And like you said earlier, it doesn't have to be Star Citizen that people are looking for. It just has to be a decent space experience because there's not much choice. And that's what I think drives a lot of the hype for this game.
Yeah, I think that's why people are excited for it, because there's just not much else.
Yeah.
In this genre.
But going past that, like, it's also a Bethesda game. So
it is. Yeah. So there's an expectation by some people who are not super negative about Bethesda of having a pretty good game, and I know that they've made a lot of mistakes, but when I think about Bethesda games, I don't think about the crap. I think about the amazing memories I made in Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and in Skyrim. Like, those have such legendary experiences and music, and like the stories are interesting. I found the stories interesting, at least the side stories. So
okay, but you said there's like a lot of crap, right? I don't.
Yeah.
I'm like a peripheral Bethesda fan. I've liked Oblivion. I loved it. Morrowind was cool. I played that a little bit. Skyrim was awesome. But I only know about Fallout 76 being particularly bad for them. Fallout 4 I know was a departure, but like, how many mistakes have they actually made on the grand scale like that?
Honestly, I'm not as close of a fan of, like, I've played a lot of their games, but I never followed closely with the drama because that was before I was even a content creator. So my perception of it is that they promised things and said that things would work, and they didn't work, and people are upset that they didn't work.
Was that's referring to Fallout 76 or just like other
76
games in general?
and other games as well. Yeah.
I know that they've got a problem with glitches. But in terms of like,
they still have bugs. They still have bugs to this day in some of those games that are pretty hilarious.
But in terms of like, I will never trust this company, look what they've done energy, I only see Fallout 76, and I understand that studios change over time, but I look at like Skyrim, I look at Fallout 4, Oblivion, and while the team might be a lot different, the people who are leading seem to be kind of similar, and I always am kind of taken aback by how extreme people react to.
I think people
Bethesda.
are overreacting and not looking at this from like a bird's eye view. Like, how many companies out there these days are making Bethesda type games? Like, there's nobody. I mean, everybody's going to this very quick multiplayer monetized experience that sells power for cash. That it's amazing when we see a game
packs.
that's trying to, our armor packs. It's amazing, I think, now that it seems like a rarity that we actually just get a game. You know, it's about the game, not about selling you shit. And Bethesda seems to be doing that with this with Starfield, and I think that's commendable. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. No release game these days is perfect. I think that technology may have just actually become really complex and difficult to deal with, and I think there's just more bugs because there's more things to go wrong nowadays. I think it's not necessarily that they're just releasing broken games. They are releasing broken games. There's also the thing of like having enough testers, right? We know this in Star Citizen, don't we? From experience, is that PES worked really well in PTU with probably only 1,000 people testing it, and then they put it out to live and it completely broke. I think there's only so much testing you can do with even thousands of people to preemptively understand what problems you're going to face when you go on the mass million player scale. And inevitably, with technology becoming more complex, I think there are more small issues that are hard to catch. So I think Starfield will inevitably release with bugs. I think there's no way to avoid it. There's just going to be so many people playing the game to find those bugs.
Judging by the gaming industry and the companies that you know for these kinds of things, do you think there's another company that could do something like Starfield right now? Like any other Western RPG firms that are...
No, I don't think so, because it's not a profitable genre.
Well, let's just say
to make.
In terms of, let's look at like recent games. Like what game company do you think can make a convincing sci-fi RPG?
Like on what scale? Like I said, it's so niche. I don't know.
For instance, I would have said BioWare 10 years ago.
But not anymore. They're gone.
But like other RPG companies,
everybody's been consolidated too. Like
right.
Microsoft bought everything, and Sony's bought everything. So what is there but indie developers to make those types of games nowadays? I don't know. I don't really trust any of the big developers to make a good sci-fi game anymore.
Yeah.
But as I say that, I did really enjoy Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi, the Jedi. What was the second?
Survivor.
Yeah, Survivor. Yeah,
those are Respawn,
I want to call it
right?
Jedi Fallen Order 2, but yes, Respawn Entertainment. Yeah. I guess maybe I trust them to make a good one, because I really liked Jedi Survivor. I really did. I think it was really good. It was a great successor that took what worked really well in Jedi Fallen Order and improved on it. Maybe the story wasn't as original, because you can't really tell that same compelling time over and over again. You know, that cool time when the Old Republic fell and it turned to the Empire. That's a really interesting story to play out. But they tried and they did a decent job. It wasn't the best story in the world, but the gameplay was great.
Yeah.
And the second one, I really liked it.
I'm kind of disappointed that I can't think of other companies that would do a good job with it. But it really,
maybe who makes Homeworld? Like, they've been making a lot of really good offshoots. Like Deserts of Karak was good, but it was an RTS. Like, if they ever wanted to devote themselves to making a really good Homeworld based FPS story based game, I think they could do a really good job.
Maybe
telling a story. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say maybe Square Enix could do something with Deus Ex.
Square Enix. Oh man, they're kind of notorious, aren't they?
No.
Don't they make a lot of monetization?
They don't own Deus Ex anymore. That got picked up by. Oh man, the publisher that's been picking up a lot of games recently. I don't remember who that was, but I don't think that's under the same ownership anymore.
Do you think CD Projekt Red could still pull off another good? I think they could. I mean, I still think they make good games. They care about the craft of video game. Like I spoke to some other developers and artists privately, and they're all so enthusiastic about what they do, and they remind me of CIG, like that kind of level of enthusiasm and dedication to the craft of wanting to just make a really good game. So, I mean, I think they could still do it. They could still make something great in this genre if they chose to.
They have proven time and again that they can make very good quests. I will say that I was not super happy with 2077's RPG elements as much, but some of those quests are very good. And the Witcher 3, Witcher 2 quests are both pretty good too.
Choose your own story games are so hard though, because you know you have to make so much different content for what people might do.
Yeah.
So it's an expensive game to make, but if they have the infinite time and money, if they could do a funding model like Star Citizen, I think they could do something pretty great.
It's going to be interesting to see, I think, what we're both kind of looking at, and I'm sure there are plenty of people in the comments who have a lot of great suggestions for companies that could do this stuff. I mean, I just pulled up a couple other lists because I realized I can't rack my head for ideas. But there are some good companies. I mean, Naughty Dog is obviously owned by Sony, so they might not do as much, but there are other great companies.
Ultimately, what we're talking about here is even with these small games, with all these small studios that are owned by larger publishers, that they are kind of tied by those publishers' decisions and the suits and what they think is going to be profitable. So it's like we can talk about all day how we think that they might do a good job, but the reality is the suits would probably come in and say, this doesn't make any financial sense. You shouldn't be doing this. Why don't you devote some time to a mobile game? Make us some money.
Which we got to turn away from. Growing up, I always thought this was your rock solid paragons of the industry kind of game. The AAA RPGs, in my opinion, were always like, that's what held down video gaming, you know, and that's changed quite a bit, like you said, with
it all changed when somebody realized that you could just turn a game into an unregulated casino.
Oh, the loot box era was a good time.
Yeah,
that kind of blew up with
era.
Battlefront
now
too.
they've matured to something else. Pay for power, pay for play. You know, it's all the same idea. It's just throw your money into the game, and hopefully you can become more powerful. I mean, Diablo still does it. So
yeah,
the Diablo Immortal. I know people are correcting me and saying that the new Diablo game is great, but mark my words on this. Mark my words. In a year's time, they're going to add microtransactions into that game. That's what they do. They start off, get people's goodwill and opinion, get you invested nowadays, and then they wait and they put those microtransactions back in. That's
you got to enjoy it while it's there, man. You got to reap what you can sow while it's still ripe. But yeah, I think also Rockstar could be cool for another RPG.
Yeah,
I mean, they make great RPGs.
I think they just couldn't give a crap about the time it'll take to make them a good game, which I admire. The fact that they've waited so long to do GTA 6 because they wanted to work on it, I think is commendable. People are upset because they have to wait so long.
Because
but look
GTA
at how good
Online
and long-lasting GTI 5 has been. I think that they could make a really space game. You're right, Rockstar could if they wanted to. But they got the GTA thing, and I think that they're going to ride that into the sunset. You know,
and like a great way to move on from that would be what a lot of people did refer to Cyberpunk at first when it came out, which was like sci-fi GTA. I know it's not that,
but that
like
sci-fi thing is so hard to appeal to. Like they kind of the trend, didn't they? They caught everybody's attention. It was so hyped. Cyberpunk was, because people thought it was going to be. You know, it kind of makes me sad that it didn't make other big AAA studios that want to see returns think, oh, science fiction could be a profitable
I think it could have.
To make it. Yeah,
I think if it did better launch, it could have. But
yeah,
like
if it launched better, maybe. But I think I don't know. I mean, like a studio like Rockstar could have probably done it. With the resources they had, they were way bigger than CD Projekt Red ever was. So, I mean, CD Projekt Red by comparison's an indie studio.
I feel like if that game could have changed the development path of maybe a Star Wars game, possibly could have encouraged a new Deus Ex game to come out faster. I don't know. It might just be wishful thinking, but I really did hope that was going to happen with Cyberpunk. And I hope that happens with Starfield.
Me too, but you know what? I think that there's still time for that because Edge Runners came out recently and it's still now winning awards. I think people are becoming more interested in the cyberpunk genre. And hopefully with the new DLC, apparently it's gonna be a really big addition to the game. They're gonna add a whole section of the city, that Pacifica region. and a whole new storyline. They're bringing in new actors and stuff. Like, I think it might reinvigorate interest in the genre and hopefully help them fund a new Cyberpunk game like they want to do. They want to make a new one. I actually wish that they would just continue adding DLCs to Cyberpunk 2077 and just fill it out like they talked about. I think people would love that, but I understand that they want to move away from the Red Engine. So
I want them to change up the mechanics. So actually, this is a great segue. We've been talking so little about Starfield in the Starfield podcast, but
sorry, we can talk about Starfield. We can do that if you want. I'm derailing the conversation constantly.
No. Cyberpunk is a very good, I think, like parallel to Starfield. It's a great way to talk about it because that's at least my connection has been Cyberpunk, Mass Effect, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Starfield. It's like what encapsulates what I think of Starfield becoming. And when I think of what made a game like Oblivion great, and this is something I've been polling people about behind the scenes a bit, is the AI were really, really good. They had this amazing perception and this way of working where if you talked to an AI, there's a specific mission a lot of people talk about. It was called, what was it? I think it was like it was the Dark Brotherhood introductory mission in Oblivion, and Bethesda fans might be losing their minds right now, but there was a really good aspect of this mission where you'd have 4 people locked in a house, you'd be talking to them, and they'd all have different relations with each other. They'd have different perceptions of you and one another, and they would have 3 different responses they could have based on how much you've talked to them, what you've said, and whether or not you said the right thing. And that method of being able to collect information and use that to interact with the game to get different outcomes is like the top of a video game interaction for me. That's what makes the best games, in my opinion.
They had a little bit of that in Cyberpunk, but nothing like Bethesda did. Yeah. I mean, you could have a certain ending if you became friends with certain people and they would go with you to the last part of the game. But yeah, I know what you mean. I never played it, but I get what you're saying. If you want more like that, I think that might be how Starfield could work, because it looks like you can find people along the way and hire them on as your crew, and they're a part of the story. It looks like they're really specific, well-tailored personalities to these certain AI guys that you'll find. Like they showed some of the people, right? Like the lady, the cowboy guy, and stuff. Like there's probably going to be some people like that you find.
Yeah. And I know we keep talking about how hard it is to make these space games because of tech and stuff, but I still end up coming back to the idea that that's the best part of the game. That's what makes it really matter, is those companions that you meet, the AI in the
heart
ship.
Of the game, yeah. You can have really good tech, but there's got to be heart in it. I agree. There has to get you in. It has to invest you emotionally in some fashion, and that happens through really well written AI and really well written interactions that make them feel alive and responsive to your decisions. So I don't know if they're going to accomplish that, but I hope they do. Bethesda's known for doing good stuff like that. So
yeah, I'm really hopeful for that. They said that there's I think Todd, numbers guy, really likes to bring out the numbers when he's talking about the game, but he said there's something like, was it 80,000 lines of dialogue or 160,000? It was like more than any other game they've done.
More than any other game they've ever done. Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Does that the number
matter to you?
It depends on how well written it is, I suppose. Like for the people I interact with, if they feel like they are real people, then yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well done. Good job. If it's because they have so many random NPCs you run into that have meaningless storylines, then I'll be like, well, that was a waste of time. Okay. Most of these guys I'm just shooting to take their stuff. So
yeah,
what's the point?
Exactly. Yeah.
It depends.
It does look like they're using go ahead.
Like, one of the things I loved about those Bethesda Fallout games is finding these really cool stories that are well written with these characters that you find. The Chinese sub was really powerful. That was a really sad story, but really cool. You could find this sub that it launched the nukes originally that destroyed the city, and there was still like a conscious ghoul on board that was from China, and he retained all of his memories and feelings, and he was like all his crew's dead. He's been trapped down there. He can't get the sub to move. He misses his family. He misses his country. He wants to just go back. He wants peace. And then you can choose to either kill him because he's a ghoul, because he blew up the city, because he was part of that, or you could choose to help him and help him get back to his country, help him go back home, whatever's left, and then find peace that way. And it was like a really touching and well written story. And I want, like, if there's stuff like that, I'll be really happy.
Yeah.
Really, really happy.
And to have that set in a space that like we just don't get to experience. I keep going.
Yeah, and a science fiction experience. Yeah, exactly. Like,
that's
so, like,
what
really,
kills
like,
me, man.
Star Citizen type experience.
I see game after game. I'm a little salty about it, to be honest. Like, since I was a kid, since Mass Effect 3, every year, like, some amazing fantasy RPG comes out and they've got great stories. It's got a bunch of hype. People are super pumped. And I just have no interest because I'm not into this, to the setting, to the atmosphere.
Yeah, like the fantasy stuff. Like, I'm kind of into it, but I'm not super into it. So it's hard for me to get as invested as other people when those games come out.
Yeah. I've been very jealous of Elden Ring players.
Yeah, like if there was a game like that in Cyberpunk, I'd be all over it. I'd be like, yeah, this is my jam now.
Exactly.
Star Citizen, take a back seat for a while.
Yeah.
Until you come out, I'm playing this game and covering it.
And that's the thing, man, is I say it all the time, but like Star Citizen is a game I found when I was looking for something like Starfield. I found it because Mass Effect 3 was done. Deus Ex wasn't having another game come out.
Yeah,
and I needed something.
I think you're the type of player that is exactly why people say that it's going to be like, some people think it's going to like take interest away from Star Citizen, is because people like you, and maybe to some extent people like me, who are also looking for that experience. And now, don't get me wrong, I want the multiplayer Star Trek-esque experience as well. People are looking for that single player, story driven, exciting science fiction, futuristic, highly detailed experience, are going to really want to play Starfield while they're waiting for Star Citizen, because Star Citizen doesn't offer that right now. So in that way, that's why people compare it, because it's going to do what they wanted to see in Star Citizen, but now, not later, because they're waiting on tech. So
yeah, there are things that make Star Citizen a very specific kind of game that I'm into. Like I said, I found it when I was looking for Starfield, but now that I've played Star Citizen, there is a reason for me to always play it. I love the multiplayer aspect. I love being able to be with friends in ships and like you said, throw someone out the back. Like, that stuff isn't touchable. But I love that Starfield is going to be another experience that I've always wanted, which is just like a good story, character-driven experience in that same kind of realm.
Like walking out in the quiet of a starry night on the moon, just discovering something new, listening to the wind, or just something like, I don't know, like that kind of cool exploration, the RPG experience, like really getting yourself invested in the world and feeling like you're there. Like I miss that about the first times I played Star Citizen, only didn't have a story. I remember that first experience, stepping out on a Daymar back in 3.0 and looking up at the stars and just being in awe. And
yeah,
it died after a while because there's nothing to keep you there. There's no story yet. But I'm excited to have that again with Starfield. Excited to feel like I'm in that universe, building up my ship, finding places to put down my base, finding new stories, new discoveries, things that nobody's seen before, being the first to find something. Like I can't wait. I'm pumped for that.
That's been a really big topic, a focal point of people talking about this game, whether they're saying, oh, it's too many planets, it's too empty, they can't fill that with a bunch of stuff. Or people who are like, wow, I just love that there's so much space for me to explore and a lot of choices. Let's talk about 1,000 planets. Is it too much?
I think that it's always relative, because let's look at GTA, for example. Like, I don't think most people play that game don't feel like, nah, man, I wish I could explore the whole world in this game. They're like, no, I'm cool. This is awesome. This is fun. I can do this city. It feels realistic. I think just the amount of detail and care and stuff that you put into like the scale of space that you provide is what matters. It doesn't matter about the quantity. May not necessarily be necessary, So what I'm saying is like it could be more than enough for people, and I don't know what they're doing to tune it. Like, are they making it so that it's a highly detailed catered experience, or is it more mostly empty? So it's gonna feel like it was pointless. I don't know.
Yeah.
I hope it's more. I think that they have to make some of those planets empty though, because they have to make the act of finding something interesting mean something. Because if you can find something interesting everywhere, it's no longer interesting. There has to be some specialness to it. There has to be some time investment to get that payoff. So I think that that's what that number is for. Is my guess would be is that they made some of those planets empty because they want to build up that tension and payoff of finding something interesting, and then in some ways maybe like what was it called? It's on the tip of my mind. Um, do something counter to your expectations. Like maybe there's a blank planet, but there's very little on it, but then suddenly you find something like a lost city or something. Like, oh, I didn't expect to find that here. Wow, that's cool. I expect
Yeah.
there'll be some of that as well. Like some of these planets will look empty, but they're not. You know, circumvent expectation.
It's a good point. Kind of the unfortunate reality of exploration is it's not special if you're not going places and not finding things. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's like that's not, you're just touring. You're just you know that stuff's going to be there. There's not really a sense of wonder.
Exactly. And you can have also too much of something to find. Like you look at No Man's Sky, it's infinite, but in that way becomes meaningless in some ways to find something. Sometime, you know, like I think really beautiful Earth-like planets are coveted, but aside from that, I don't know. I think there's got to be a balance. It's hard to find that balance. And
Yeah, there really does.
Bethesda, I think they probably, Todd, I would imagine, thought long and hard about that balance, about how what are enough planets to make this feel right. And I think Star Citizen has to figure that out too, not to go off topic, but they're too early to understand like how they're going to solve that issue.
Yeah, there is a balance, and it's obviously going to be different for everybody, but as a game that needs to appeal to the highest number of people, there's got to be some very difficult decisions to make between making sure people will find interesting things on a lot of the planets. I mean, 1,000 planets, maybe say that like 700 something of them have things of interest on them, and also making sure those things are unique enough and not generic enough that people are interested. Because like you said, with No Man's Sky, there are tons of little outposts and space stations and things you can land at, but it gets this really generic feeling over time. Because
a lot of it's really samey.
Yeah.
I think that's why you need those handcrafted special spaces where, like, you know, artists put some really beautiful, like crafts a beautiful canyon. Like we need a Yosemite Valley. We need a Grand Canyon. We need a Mount Everest. Those types of experiences are special because they're so unique on Earth, and there's nowhere else like them. And that's why people go to them. If they're everywhere, then they're no longer special. So that's why they need to craft some of these experiences and some of these. That's why you can't procedurally generate things. You have to make unique experiences. And unfortunately, procedural generation doesn't do that. It makes everything similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I if I were them, that's what I would do. I can't speak for them, and I can't say that that's in fact what they're going to do. Maybe we're speculating too much, but I hope that that's the way they saw it, because that's the way I see it.
I like the idea that, and we don't know how far or how easy they're going to be on this idea, but the idea that you can mainly follow the story. I guess this is generally in all games. You follow the story, you stick to the main path, and maybe you don't see more than 5 or maybe like 10 different planets in the game, or you can choose to explore all that stuff and use all of that breadth to your advantage. What I'm hoping they don't do is that they try to force people to use those planets. They try to say, hey, for the main story, you need to go and explore this many planets, because like some people just want to have that story-based space game. They don't want to be forced into exploring 1,000 planets. That sounds like a waste. It seems like one of those things that's really good for some players but not something that they should be trying to include for the rest of players.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes down to the craft. Like, if they can, I think the ultimate goal is to inspire people to want explore as opposed to force them to explore.
Right.
Like, I think Breath of the Wild is a masterpiece in that fact because they hide so many great little fun experiences that you never expected to find. Some really well crafted puzzles and unexpected treasures and unexpected vistas and things and unexpected stories, and it makes you be like, oh man, I find more of these unexpected events that just make you like go like, wow, that's cool, somebody did that, I can't believe that I found this, that's so hilarious, that's so fun. So if they can do that, then there'll be a successful game.
Have you seen any games in our little corner of the industry that can do that? The sci-fi niche?
No, I have not. I
Well,
think
that's
the
good.
best example is again Breath of the Wild. I think that they might have mastered the open world genre. How do you make an open space uh, feel like you want to explore, feel useful, other than just adding time to the experience? Because they had, I remember playing that game, and they give you ways to travel like horses, and even now and in Tears of the Kingdom, they allow you to like craft your own vehicles to travel faster. But I find myself always running because I don't want to miss what I might find. I don't want to miss that unexpected encounter or treasure or a Korok seed or something. So they if they can make it always feel worthwhile to explore, always feel like you can find something interesting, I think that they'll be successful. And it comes down
There's
to them giving people a variety of things to explore, to do, to find, to experience, as opposed to one thing with long periods of waiting in between.
Yeah, I am definitely setting myself up for the possibility that the exploration side of the game might just fall short. I've never really been in a Bethesda game for the exploration aspect. It's always been kind of the characters and the story. So
Yeah.
I'm understanding that that might just literally be going to planets and doing similar things a lot.
Yeah, and exploration is a hard thing to do because exploration is finite. There's only so many things you can explore before you've explored it all. So I don't think there's ever going to be a case where exploration is perfect. But if you can make it feel worthwhile for the ride for that period of time you play the game, then all right, sounds good. Make people interested to want to go explore and find cool things, and that would be a successful exploration mechanic, I think.
Yeah. Let's talk about expectations you've seen surrounding this game. We actually touched on that a bit. People kind of talking about it being a replacement for Star Citizen and stuff. But besides that discussion, I don't know how often you go on the Starfield subreddit. I used to be on there a lot before we got more solid info, so I would see like the speculation and expectations that would pop up. Do you think that people have been able to temper their expectations a bit for this game? Do you think that the hype is
Yeah.
is running away?
I think that. Sorry, 1 second.
Bless you.
Thank you. I think that we've seen that in the form of negativity recently. If you notice that there's suddenly been a lot of negative videos in Starfield, I think that that's the reality setting in for some people, that it's not what they expected, that they had overhyped the game and thought of too many things being in it. So I think expectations have become more realistic, I think, from people who have followed the news. But are there people who still have unrealistic expectations out there? Definitely. I think there's some crazy people still holding out hope that they're going to have multiplayer, that they're going to have atmospheric flight. They're going to have a fully, like, going to be able to EVA and board chips and stuff like that out of like a cutscene. And I think they're going to be really disappointed when they find out that that's not at all how it's done. So, but I think those people are becoming fewer and fewer. I think Bethesda's doing a better job this time of managing expectations specifically by Todd going out and just directly answering questions and saying, no, we're not doing that, and here's why. If people are paying attention to what he's saying. I think there's still some questions out there, but at least the big ones have been answered for me. Is there atmospheric flight? No, there's not. Like, are planets fully, like, can you fly anywhere onto a planet? Yes, but it's procedurally generated by a seed, and it's probably a limited play area. It's not like a full planet, actually.
See, they haven't
so,
actually
like,
said that, right? They haven't said that you can't just keep walking on a planet as long as you want to go. Because that's a question I've had. Is it?
I
Can
don't
you
think
just-
that you. I don't know how they're going to handle it, but I don't think you'll be able to. I don't think planets are actually round. I think they're just flat.
Well,
You know,
duh.
they've got a skybox that's 3D.
We know this.
That's
Morph.
unique to each system. Yeah. Like, here's what I think.
Round.
Here's my philosophy on the subject. Don't ever always limit your expectations. Don't ever overestimate what they're going to do. Don't ever assume that they're going to go above and beyond, and your expectations will never be disappointed. You'll always be surprised, or you'll just be like, oh, that's what I expected. So
how much of your expectations do you base on their previous games? Because like we talked about earlier, that's what a lot of people are expecting.
As I understand it, Creation Engine has problems with pop-in loading. It's slow.
Ladders.
And they haven't been able to, and they're just by the nature of the way they're doing planetary exploration, the way they showed it in the preview. You look at a planet in the map, you click where you want to go, and the ship goes through a cutscene to land. That tells me that and there's another thing they said, that the areas are generated unique to each player. So one person visiting the exact same area is going to see something completely different than somebody else, because each time somebody clicks on somewhere to land, a new generation is created. That tells me that it's probably a limited area. They're not generating the whole planet every time you click on an area.
Well, I think they said
it's one little tiny section.
It's per game save though, right? So like if you leave and come back, it'll be the same.
It's per game save, but there's no way they're generating an entire planet seed. When you click on a place to land, it would take forever. It's just inconceivable that they would do that. So I think that kind of answers the question: is the planet fully walkable? No, it's not. There's going to be some kind of barrier. It'll be like, hey, you're running out of oxygen. Hey, you're too far from the ship, or something. They're gonna have some kind of in-lore thing that'll stop you. And I think that also answers why you can't fly in atmosphere, why you don't have ground vehicles, why jetpacks are the only way to transport you. It's because they're not fully realized planets. Could they do that tech? I think Todd said that they said they could. But does that mean it's in the game? No, it does not mean it's in the game. It just means that they found out that they had a way, they knew how to do it. It doesn't mean it's been done. And that's what I expect. I expect it to be a very limited experience. I think that this is another thing though that people do, is that they think, oh, the planet's not fully round, I'm going to hate this game. Well, how is it really going to affect your experience? If you don't think about that, if you don't think about the magic, you'll enjoy it. It's like Disney World. You know, like you're walking around Disney World, you're walking around Main Street, like, wow, feels cool. And they never want to tell you that the facades of those buildings are fake, that if you look behind them, they're all up on stilts. You know, like it's completely all facade. But as long as you don't know that, you enjoy the experience. So
and that's
does
life,
that make
right?
Disney World bad because it's all facade? No, people go there because they want to be blissfully ignorant and enjoy that otherworldly experience. And that's the same thing with a video game. Same thing with this Starfield. It's going to be a facade in a lot of cases, but as long as you don't think about that facade, you just let yourself get immersed, as long as it's got that fidelity and it doesn't get in the way, where it's obvious, where you actually literally run up against the wall that's painted, that, you know, it's a fake landscape, that there's a box there that you can't go by. As long as that doesn't happen, we don't touch that wall, you'll enjoy the experience, because you'll never know the wall's there.
And that's the reality of like everything. Eating food is
Everything,
like that.
everything.
You're doing something without understanding fully what is involved in it, because you don't need to know that stuff.
Let me tell you, Star Citizen's skybox is a painted skybox. It's not real stars. Does that make the experience of Star Citizen less visceral or realistic feeling?
I want a refund.
It does. You want actual stars.
I was told I could go to those stars more if I don't. But like that's a good point. Is like there are levels, right? You don't, and not every game has to completely realize everything. You can. That's what's great about the different types of games. Some of them put more effort into specializing and doing that stuff. Some of them build great persuasion and dialogue systems, so we can enjoy that instead. I'm cool with not exploring a whole planet. I can explore your whole mind.
Think about every good game that you've ever played. I guarantee you that in most every case that you've played, that they've done this, that they've created facade. What they do is they employ tricks. They do 3D skyboxes. They create obstructions down certain hallways, because actually beyond that hallway, there's nothing. There's nothing done over there. It's just unused gameplay space because they had limitations to the gameplay engine. Like every game has done that you've ever played. Everyone. Nothing is fully realized. It's all facade. So Starfield is not going to be any different, and I don't think it's going to diminish the experience. And that's the thing that Todd, I think, was trying to say, that he had to balance what actually matters for gameplay versus what should you make for tech that's going to enhance that gameplay. For him, it was atmospheric flight was too complicated to do. There were too many limitations with the engine. It wasn't going to enhance the gameplay experience for what he wanted to create. That's his thing, whatever. I disagree with that, but that's what he saw, and I can respect that. And I don't think people should let that diminish the experience for them, that those planets aren't fully round. It doesn't make it. Like, people get really weird about that when I say, like, I don't think the planets are really round. They're like, oh, you think the game's gonna suck? Like, no, I didn't say that. It's just that they're gonna be round. It's just like, that's why they were able to do it so fast. That's my point.
Oh gosh, it's like that with everything. I made a post about like just thinking, like, just completely in a vacuum. I just like the way that the Starfield map looks. You know, I understand that
it looks
every
good.
game
Who
has.
cares that it's not a 3D hologram that's actually real or whatever? It works good. Well, that's what I want.
Well, my point was that, like, if I post about it, it has nothing to do with other games. I just like the way that it looks, but I get replies that are like, "Oh yeah, but like Star Citizens looks like this, and it's gonna do." And I'm like, "Bro, I know that. I get that. Star Citizen can do what they want. I just like that Starfield looks the way it does, and I feel like there is a lot of that sort of. If you mention something, you got to read in between the lines and know what they're really trying to say.
It's like you're saying something bad. Well, look. When I talk about the star map in Starfield, I am talking about Star Citizen sometimes, and I'm not coy about it. It's like,
sometimes I will bring it up. Yeah.
Look, you don't have to do complicated shit to make a good star map. As long as it's good, as long as it's legible and clean, I'm fine. All right.
Yeah.
This is good. Starfield got a great star map. I like it. It's cool, and
I think it looks pretty cool.
It looks really good. I love the actually even love some of the subtle design choices, like the
gravity
mesh
well
they use to describe the gravity well. It's so cool.
I love that.
I hope it's meaningful in some way beyond just that it's a visual thing. It'd be kind of cool, like if you get too close to the sun, you start getting pulled into it or something. That's definitely speculation. Don't expect that. Maybe cool if they do some stuff like that. Who knows? But yeah, I like it.
It's a good looking thing. I like that. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Let's talk about. I kind of want to start to wrap things up a bit here. I want to talk about what you think who is this game made for? Starfield.
I actually do think this is made for a wider audience. I think that Bethesda is trying to tap into that wider market that likes other Bethesda games, but in a new setting. And I think this comes on the back of people who are interested in things like SpaceX. People are becoming more interested in space in the wider community nowadays. Finally, once again, I think there was a lull after the moon landing where people just became disinterested in space.
Yep.
For a long time, that's why we lost a lot of our know-how on how to make rockets, and we had to redo all of it. But now I think people generally know about space, and they're generally interested. Most people are, and they're like, let's go after that. Let's do NASA punk, kind of futuristic. Could be kind of where it is. Familiar type of game from Bethesda. I think that's where they're going towards, and that's why if you look at some of the videos, they got millions of views on them. Versus like Star Citizen. Let's look what is the most viewed video. It's got to be in the millions.
Yeah. Starfield is getting a lot of attention, and that goes back to what we were talking about. Like, they're not going to put in the effort to try and have 3D planets because they want to get the most people.
Yeah. 2.7 million on their Starfield Direct video they posted a little bit ago, that 45-minute gameplay reveal.
It's like a month ago.
So
Maybe.
yeah, a month ago. To sort by view count, 17 million 2 years ago for the official teaser trailer. 8.8 million for the ambient sound from it. Oh, that's irrelevant. 5.1 for the official gameplay reveal a year ago.
We're not niche
So 2
anymore,
years,
folks.
yeah, it's that. Well, I mean, I think that they've found a way to tap into that wider market. It's not maybe as wide as like GTA, and it never will be, but it's wide enough that they're gonna definitely see a good return on whatever investment they've made.
Yeah. And that's so exciting, man. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just so many
hey,
people getting into space games.
Here's the thing too. I before I forget this point, I think that this is really, really important to understand. The way that they've designed the game is towards a wider market, and that's why you can't expect sim-like elements, because that is a technical, difficult thing for most people to grasp. It needs to be able to be played on an Xbox remote. It needs to be easy to pick up and play right away with not too many bindings. So think traditional RPG, but in space.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Don't expect anything more than that. Don't expect Star Citizen, like complicated controls, being able to do like Newtonian physics space travel. It's going to be very much like
Can't
a
even
traditional
EVA
space
from
game.
your ship.
Yeah, it can't even EVA because it's a different gameplay space. It's not the same. It's not the same as the space that you walk around in on the planet. They're not connected. They're not in the physical same environment like in Star Citizen. They're probably not even scaled the same for running better on the engine. They're probably smaller, would be my guess. So that's what you should expect, and that doesn't make it any worse. It's going to be, I think, still fun. They're appealing to that wider audience, and that's how you do it. You make it approachable. So,
do you think that makes it any? Do you think that makes it overhyped? That it is going for such a casual experience, but for people who might be into space sims or space games regularly?
No. I don't think so, because they'll have an expectation of it being approachable. And as long as it doesn't circumvent those expectations, but then wedges some of those cooler, complicated, interesting elements in that we space game lovers love, it'll get them interested in the genre. It'll make them science fiction nerds like us. It'll make them want to play Star Citizen and buy those games, and it'll actually, I hope, help games like Star Citizen get more people interested.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a good thing. I think you need to open the door to the wider community for science fiction. You need to get them interested in a way that's relevant to them. And that's the only way you're going to get them interested in stuff like this. Like Star Citizen. Yeah.
People miss that. Like we need a beginner's guide to sci-fi.
Yeah.
It happens in movies, it happens in shows, it needs to happen in games.
So that's why the story, like if we look at it, we're like, oh man, that's not really that new, is it? Like, oh, find an artifact. It speaks only to you, and now you must find the aliens. Like, oh, we've heard that for every game. Yeah, but for somebody who's never done anything in the science fiction genre, not even read a book or watched a show, they'll be like, wow, that's cool. Oh, I don't want to do this space thing. All right, so like, don't underestimate how many people I think never have experienced that before.
Yeah,
young people too. So like, teens and stuff, like a younger audience, I think also maybe is looking at this game, not just like in a Star Citizen age range. It could bring a whole new generation of backers to Star Citizen.
Yeah, it's seriously good. And let's see, my last question was one that comes up in the Star Citizen community. This is one just to finish us off. Gosh, I can't remember what it was now. People have been asking. No, I'm not. I can't remember it. It was kind of, it came off of the question of who is this game made for, but I guess it was the idea that something about Star Citizen players maybe. No, I'm not going to be able to remember it.
But if that's the question, then it's definitely yes. It's made for Star Citizen players, and it's made for the general audience, but it's somewhere in between. It's not a science fiction sim game. Like I said, it's a very arcadey and generally approachable experience for everybody.
Yeah, and I like that. I'm excited for that.
Me too.
All right, man.
Me too. It means that people that I hope could get into science fiction, I can maybe get them into it with this game. Maybe I can suggest it to some friends or family and say, hey, try this game. If you like it, you might like Star Citizen. Star Citizen is harder to get people to be interested in, but this, maybe they'll be down for it,
Really just hope that it has a good launch and they can get past any major big game breaking bugs that might.
Well, look, I would be shocked if they didn't if somebody didn't find some drama. There's going to be some bug that somebody makes big and dramatic.
Bugs for sure. Just
expect
nothing
expect some drama.
I just don't want something that's going to like ruin 80% of players' first time playing. You know?
Right. As long as it's not like, hey, we're missing a huge part of the game, but we didn't tell you.
Right, exactly.
Like, it'll be fine.
Turns out you can't land on planets.
Yeah, you can't actually land. Yeah, we're gonna do that in a DLC. You'll have to pay for.
Yeah, none of that.
Maybe?
None of that.
No, none of that. Yeah.
All right. Closing comments. Anything you wanted to say before we finished off?
As I think I've ended most of my podcasts with you, Space Tomato, which have always turned way longer than we ever expect. I think we should expect 2 hours from now on if we ever talk. Is that anything I say bad about Star Citizen doesn't mean that I hate the project or that I'm abandoning it or that I don't love CIG and the game in general. It just means, well, I would say it does mean I love them. I like you don't tell somebody that they should improve and here's how if you don't care about them, and that's what I look at it as when I talk about Star Citizen. I'm not saying these things that look negative to hurt the project, but because I want people at CIG to know that I care and that I think that there's some improvement that can be made, and I hope that this can be improved, that they can either communicate or communicate better or actually produce some more tangible things for us. In the interim, we'll wait for Squadron, or at least talk about Squadron and tell us why, you guys are putting so many resources in it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, whatever happens, I think.
Thank you for having me, Space Tomato. Once again.
Sure.
You're amazing, man.
Before you're done, you let people know where they can find your content.
You can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Morphologis, where I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. But recently I've been kind of taking breaks if I feel tired, because I figure that it's not as important to force myself to do things. I'm also on YouTube, of course, youtube.com/Morphologis. You can also find me on Twitter at Morphologis same name, and I'm also on Instagram if you want to see some projects I've posted. I also just posted a new project on Twitter that I'm doing. So a house that we talked about before the stream. So if you guys want to see that, you're most welcome to follow me in any of those. I invite you to. Oh, and I'm also on TikTok, but I haven't posted for a while on there. I need to get to make some shorts on there. It's fun.
You getting on Threads?
Not yet. I'm very reluctant to spread out so much still. Like, if I'm going to devote some resource into it, I have to be fairly confident that's not going to disappear in a month.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I'm not saying Threads will, but there's a lot of social media that's come up and gotten popular, and they're suddenly gone, and people invested time in them for nothing. So I want to see some confidence in that before I do it.
Social media anxiety at the moment. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me again. It's always a good time talking to you about space games in general.
Yeah, same here, man. It's always great, and I wish we could have time to do more of this. So
yeah, that's the crazy thing. For those who don't know, our time zones are nuts. Fellow expat living in Thailand, and then I'm in Turkey.
Well, our time zones are actually closer than most people's, so I feel like we could do more if we could schedule things. But yeah, generally it's not hard. It's not easy because you are still different. You woke up not too long ago. It's early morning for you, whereas it's the afternoon for me now. So
yeah, but we'll get something figured out. Either way, man.
We will.
Always a good time talking to you. Thanks for joining me.
Oh.
And yeah.
Wait, one last thing. Are you going? I know you're like, because you misbooked your hotels. Are you still going to CitizenCon or not?
That is up in the air. It's looking like we will be going, but just
I hope you will, because I really want to meet you and your wife. My wife's coming too, so I think it'd be great for us to grab dinner or something and hang out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have to do something like that at some point. Hopefully at CitizenCon, but if not, I'm gonna ship you guys out here to Turkey. We'll give you the full
we want
experience.
to do the visit in Turkey. My wife really wants to see Turkey, so
it'd be great. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming and watching this, or listening if you are. I know I have an unexplained lack of hair on both my face and head, but for those of you who watch the stream, you will know how that happened. Either way, thanks again for coming to the podcast. This has been episode 110, looking at Starfield. And folks, I will see you all next week.